call this meeting to order. Roll call.
All right. Chair Fan,
Here.
John Rocha,
Here.
Nicole Kennedy. Here. Randy Goodman.
Here.
Anthony Teeters.
Here.
And Luther Kraxberger.
Here.
All right. And then roll call minutes.
Did we lose a number?
Yep. Item 3A is approval of the minutes. If everybody's read them, if there's any comments or concerns or changes, I can have a motion.
I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Item 3B is a presentation that we're not going to get. Is that correct?
Yes. So we hope to have Penrose come in the future, but unfortunately they had some things pop up and couldn't make it down. So we'll keep everybody posted on their reschedule.
Okay. And then 3C is, as everybody probably knows, the council approved all 5 of our requested motions at their last city council meeting. And so it's time for us to start prioritizing and get moving. It's a good thing. Could you give us an update on the grant? Have you heard anything at all?
Yes, so we should know this week whether we get it, how much, hopefully we find out how much we get this week. But as soon as we know, we'll send everything out. But Mike did reach out to them, and we should know this week.
And is that a prescribed amount, or will they tell us how much they granted us?
They'll tell us it's up to 200,000, but they said depending on how much interest they had and how many other entities were ready to go, it could be less than that.
Okay.
Mike, did we establish where that money's going to go based on the council meeting?
It
All the
has to
concern?
go to a housing assessment.
But I mean, what account? It won't go in the general fund, right?
Correct. So our, I will try to gently discuss finance things because I don't know much about it other than our finance team has an account for grants that this would go into, but they also did and are creating an account for workforce housing to use in the future depending on what we need it for.
Okay.
So that's my very basic explanation. But yes, we do have a place to put it.
But nobody else will be able to,
Correct. Yeah, nobody will be able to touch it. We'll be bound to the grant guidelines. So, yeah, we have to follow exactly what they tell us to follow on that one. So nobody else can touch that funding.
Right, so the council approved a line item in the general ledger for that item. So number one, we've got to, if we do receive a grant, we've got a place to put it, and we have a place to, if we're successful in getting private dollars, donations, if we get a stakeholders group together that all pitches in, there is a separate line item to be used just for that. So there is some level of comfort, I guess you might say, for those people that know that.
it's going to go where it's supposed to go.
Well, yeah, right,
And we'll be able to protect it.
correct.
Cool. I wasn't sure after the council meeting what got approved.
And I did end
I
up,
wasn't either.
You told me in the hallway afterward, and that's when I knew.
Didn't go as planned. Let's
Understood. We got there, though. We got there in a roundabout way. It was a little longer trail than we expected, but we got there.
exactly. So, and I did find out from finance, they're like in the future, it's actually more of an administrative thing to create a line item. Didn't know that. But we do have to go to council and need to go to council with any policies or if we are trying to get funding, want to spend funding, things like that. So, because it's a recommending body.
Right.
So, I did want to just point out in your miniature packet that you have, there is just a kind of goal tracking list where we can go through and prioritize what you guys want to start working on and kind of what order and create a bit of a game plan and next steps for those.
Yeah.
Amber, for the number 10 is a setup a fund account for workforce housing. Is there, so obviously we've talked as a committee of this like bucket of funds being for like say, for example, the first thing is a place to park the grant money. There was some ideas circulating about going to title companies and saying, hey, would you just add a box or a donation box to every transaction, that kind of stuff, right? So my understanding, it's where we're pulling all the funds for whatever workforce housing efforts will happen. But then you just mentioned that because we're a recommending body, is there not, like, it seems pretty cumbersome to feel like we have to go ask to use money from this bucket of funds every time to the council. So is there any parameters we can put on it early on as part of the workforce housing policy that says,
As far as I know, no.
Okay.
As far as, and Chelsea, step in if I'm wrong on this, but as far as I know, you will have to, if you want to go get donations, you would have to create kind of a policy to do so and get that approved.
Yeah.
Yeah, any spending, we would have to take it to council to dictate what we're spending.
Yeah.
So yeah, as a recommending body, unfortunately, you can't do anything
Yeah,
without their
That,
say.
that came up at the council meeting
Yeah, it did.
Tuesday, and so so it's clear, and I'll restate what I said. We are a commission that answers to the will of the mayor and the council, and that's all we are. We can make our recommendations, but ultimately, it is the city of Prescott that spends the money.
Yeah.
We can make our recommendations, but it has to be them. And I think that is not only in accordance with the city's procurement code. I think there are state statutes that would also guide us on spending funds that, once it goes into the city's coffers, it might be that line item, but at that point, it belongs to the city.
And I-
There might be restriction on how it's spent, but it has to be spent in accordance with the city's procurement code and state statute.
And I think that's why you got us approved at council, was because you made that statement. It's
Yeah.
sort of a guarantee to them.
Yeah.
Because there were some uneasy minds on this issue,
Yeah, so
right?
we make our recommendation, but ultimately, the city acts on it. And that's at
It's
the
a
direction of the
longstanding
mayor.
policy for everybody.
And if I could just
Yeah.
respond to one thing that John said. So as you all move forward with initiatives and goals and things that you see, hey, we'd like to move forward with asking escrow companies to put, a box on the escrow documents, that would be a recommendation to council. And then if that was approved and funds started to come in, we would look at doing something for FY26 budget. So having a budget established that the council felt comfortable with, and that would kind of speak to how funds were going to come in and how funds were going to go out. But that's after all of the legwork is performed with, okay, how is this going to happen? Then we could take the step further and say, okay, we know how it'll happen. We know how to set it up. Is council comfortable with this? Then let's start working through the next appropriate budget cycle to say, hey, council, this is where the revenues are coming from, and this is how we'd like to budget those spendings. Does that make sense? So that could be a long-term goal, though.
So John,
Oh, go ahead.
just to be clear, your committee, this committee, as the recommending body, can come up, you guys can hash out all day long how you want to spend that money. And then, obviously you come in to the council and, it's just the process. It's the process of how it's done, policies. And, it's done basically just to prevent fraud and misuse of funds.
yeah, I'm not too concerned with the spending part. I would hope and trust that the city would go, this is for the efforts of getting housing here for our workforce in the community. It's more of the barriers of speed, if you will, of trying to get, like, for example, I'm focused really big on the number 10 because we've gone countless times back and forth, including you, Mike, of saying, like, funding's everything, right? If we don't have funding, we're like spinning our wheels. So for me, it's like number 10 as a short-term goal is huge because I'm thinking, well, maybe we should just talk about what are those revenue funding sources that we want to pursue. Title companies, if, we have the community stakeholder folks and they're like, hey, we want to write a check and support these initiatives, or whatever the case may be, the grant money. I think focusing, and I'm speaking to the committee here, focusing on those efforts, I think are very low hanging fruit, and I think they're much needed because that's the revenue is what's going to propel us forward the fastest on trying to accomplish these things. We all know the budget's tight. We're not going to come up with magical ways within the city's budget to fund this, right? So it's like we kind of have to take that burden on ourselves and then try to figure out, okay, well, let's at least come up with those ideas and go fund it. You know, that's just my point, is having a conversation about it as a committee.
Anthony?
Also, I think we need to look at a charitable 501c3 or whatever because major corporations, banks have Community Reinvestment Act, that they're required to give a certain amount to the community. I was able to get a fire truck for Will Hoyt, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But they won't do it unless it's a charitable something. So there needs to be some account set up so they have, because I'd like to approach all the banks and try and get them all on board and say, all right, you give this. I know you're smaller. I don't care what you give. We'll never publish what each bank gave. It was a group of banks that helped us with this.
Right.
Because the little ones say, oh, the big one banks will get credit and we won't. And when I had a Habitat house built, deal going in was that city would never, or the Habitat would never know what each bank gave. It was just the banks that built the house. Mm-hmm. And I was able to sell it that way.
Yeah.
So I think that you got to look at the charitable aspect because all these major corporations are going to give you nothing if they don't benefit. I hate to say that, but if they don't benefit somewhere like on their taxes or whatever.
Yeah, I think if it goes in, my opinion would be, as somebody that deals with that frequently, the city would be in, if you will, an or equal of a 501c3.
And that's fine.
Would meet those requirements. We would just, I mean, that's the whole reason for having a separate line item, is to know that's where the money's going to go and some assurance of that. But I think we can get there. My feeling is a 501c3 or a land trust is probably something that we're likely to go eventually. There's a few dominoes to get in place before that, though, I think.
Well, and I think it goes back to the goal number 2, the forming the third-party stakeholder group. Because essentially, we've had the conversation before that it can't be the city that's doing all of the work and maybe not even necessarily collecting the funds. It should be a broader stakeholder group with people at the table. To your point, the city has a share maybe in this. We mentioned community land trusts, some sort of organization. So this may be the stepping stone to that part of it. Right. And maybe as you're looking at the prioritization of goals, the first thing would be to reach out to the stakeholders and say, what are you comfortable with as far as collecting funds and how should those be distributed? Because it's not the city that's going to be the heavy lifter on much of it. I think we discussed before that the city is going to be the kind of the flagship and the major collaborator, bringing the cheerleader, the champion. Yeah, pick your adjective. But we're going to kind of get everybody together, push the issue forward, and contribute from the perspective of getting everybody speaking with one voice. But as it relates to maybe collecting funds, and that's hard work that might be better suited to a entity that cobbles together funds like Northern Arizona Housing Solutions. Grant monies here, state monies, Fed monies, donations here, there, and everywhere. There are professional outfits that do that kind of work, just that. But for the city, I think the role will be to get everybody together and focusing on that first priority of getting the stakeholder group together and starting those conversations. Like, are you in favor of a public housing authority? Are you in favor of a community land trust? Here's the pros, here's the cons, kind of deal.
Yeah.
Does that make
Chelsea,
sense?
darn it, you're taking all the wind out of my sails.
I apologize. I'm going to put this down.
So everything that she just said is pretty much what I was going to say. I think items 1 and 2 go hand in hand. I think it starts with forming a stakeholder group, getting that group together and say, what do you guys want? And how are we going to fund this? Like I agree 100%. We're not going to have council, mayor, and council support for funding all of this. They're going to be limited. Now, as it relates to police, fire, public works, I think we'll have some support. But this is a community. I think it's going to be community driven. And I agree 100%. We're starting out as a city commission, a mayor's commission, but this may very well evolve into a community. This group folds eventually, and it turns into a 501c3, a land trust, a housing authority that covers central Yavapai County. Yeah.
Hey, Mike, can we just back up 1 second before we get going down this list too far? For those that weren't there, the council chambers were packed because there was a lot going on that day. And I think this board owes Nicole a huge thanks because she got up there and was on the hot seat big time, took it, and made a very good presentation that represented all of us. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, Randy, good point. Thank you, Nicole.
Okay.
I think what Anthony was talking about, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, and we do need to talk to our attorney, Matt Pedracki, about this. It's when you have a corporation that wants to donate funds, in order for them to get the IRS write-off, basically, it has to funnel through a 501c3 or C4, whatever it is. Right. So then the question is, like Mike said, can the city accept it and also allow the corporation a write-off? It would be a donation in terms of a donation, how they write it off. But how they write it off is going to depend also how much they get back on their IRS filing. So I think what I would like to find out from Matt is, do you set up a 501 on the outside and then you donate the money to the city, or does the city donate the money to a 501? So that's a technicality we'll have to figure out.
Yeah, unless I've been doing it wrong for decades, I better be careful here. The city of Prescott, as a public agency, meets those same requirements. So I can make a charitable donation to the city of Prescott, and it meets those same requirements as a 501c3. So I don't think the city would have to set up a separate 501c3. We may want one because ultimately this is a county issue. This isn't a city issue. City's taking the lead. We're the cheerleaders. We're getting things going. But ultimately, this is a regional issue, right?
So in the past, Mike, you've been able to donate to the city and get a full refund from the IRS as a donation or a portion?
Yeah, we've been able to count it as a charitable contribution.
Right.
So it's not like the one-to-one, obviously, but it is a deductible charitable contribution. I believe.
So can I make a recommendation? So number 2 and number 9, community outreach, kind of go hand in hand too. That if the first priority, or if one of the higher priorities is getting that stakeholder group together, which is what it kind of sounds like, it may be good to have committee members. So each of you now have the stakeholder list with a brief description. Did my best. Sorry. Some of them are went to websites and stuff, but maybe just starting with that stakeholder section on top, and the committee members reach out to them, and we can pick a date, whether it's the next meeting or if we wanted to do a separate date to where we do a working meeting or a study session style. But those two might go hand in hand with the outreach to just have you guys go out and start talking to those stakeholders to get them interested and invested to coming to a meeting.
Yeah, I would suggest that we start with an invitation of the low-hanging fruit, and then get an invitation out once we get started to expand that group if necessary. It might take it, if the group gets too big, it's going to get too cumbersome. So we might have a group within a group, an executive committee of the stakeholder group. But I mean, there are some obvious ones here. City of Prescott obviously is one, and I would defer to staff and mayor and council on, does that mean Brandon Nunez is the representative on that stakeholder group? Or is it Amy and Holger, and someone at Public Works in addition to that? I mean, I'll have to defer to you guys on who represents the city in that stakeholders group, because there's various entities and various departments may have a different view of it. So I'll defer to you guys on that.
Okay.
And then obviously Dignity, obviously Yavapai College, obviously the Prescott Unified School District. I mean, there's a group of 7 or 8 that's easy to identify that I think are going to be all in. Say, yes, we absolutely want to have our input. And you're right. The first thing is, what do you think, guys, think it's going to work for you? Because at some point we're going to be reaching out to them and say, we're going to need help funding this one way or another. So I think, to me, that's our first order of business, is get a stakeholders group together and get their input, because they're the employers that need the help, and they're the employers we're going to be looking for to help bring this to fruition.
Oh, yeah.
Just something to think about as you're going through this. So, as part of the general plan update, we have an implementation section we're creating. And so that's going to have all the goals and strategies from the plan into a separate spreadsheet. And what we're looking for is who's responsible for that goal and strategy. What is the timeline, short-term, mid-term, or long-term, or continuous? Because some things we just continue doing. And then we'll have another section for a complete date. And this will be something that's going to be on the city website to show everybody, including city staff, who's responsible for this. What's the timeline that everyone agreed to? And then if it's completed, that way we can keep track of it. So that's something to think about when you go through this. Whose responsibility? Is it the committees? Is it city staff? Is it another entity, or who's going to be responsible for doing these objectives?
All right. Yeah, good point.
Last December,
Oh, no, the timeline and everything. When will
July.
done July?
So part of that, I mean, if we get the stakeholder group together quickly, if we're awarded this grant and we're looking at somebody at the city to get this, there's a lot of work to be done, and there's some heavy lifting to be done. Again, in time, I can see this easily moving away from the city, and city being a participant in a workforce housing group. For right now, we're it. So to get this thing going and get it started and get the framework, it's certainly, thank goodness the city is taking a community lead. But in time, it may very well be something else. But in the meantime, we'll need to look at that person that is the go-to person. So anything from the group? You want to sit down and start agreeing on who the initial invitations go to for a stakeholder group and get that started? Is that where we start?
Can I inject one thing here?
Absolutely.
You know I can't, right?
Microphone, though, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I see a lot of fire departments on this stakeholder list, and 30 years in the service, a lot of departments will make special assignments with some of their personnel. It can be a volunteer deal. It can be free. They volunteer their time. So I'm wondering if there's any thought about that for these guys to help raise funds, or however we're going to approach donations, to get these guys involved in that through their own departments. I don't know.
I think they can certainly help. We need someone to sit down and start working on agreements, for instance, with Northern Arizona Housing Authority. We've already heard several people say, if we have a down payment assistance program, that's going to solve the needs of several. It's not going to serve everybody, and probably not the majority, but a lot of people could benefit from that alone. Well, someone's got to take the lead and work on those documents in that program, and then institute the program, and then monitor and and do the work involved.
All I'm saying is there's a potential for a lot of resource help when you get to that point in these departments, because guys that want to promote get involved in these special committee deals to help their careers, plain and simple. I did it.
Okay,
And a lot of times you volunteer your time. So.
cool. Agreed.
So
Well,
I would, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so Tammy, I think, has a really good outline of kind of, at least for today. So we know the stakeholder meeting is kind of a priority, and we can get into the weeds a little bit on that in a little bit later, but just going through the list to start with of who's actually going to be responsible for things short-term, mid-term, long-term, because then if whatever staff is responsible on, we can start working on that and bring things to you guys as we keep going. So if it's the ADU code revision, we know that that's going to be staff working on that to bring it to you guys for review. So if we could go through the list and kind of stay at that high level just to start with, to create that timeline and who's going to be the main, whether it's the committee, staff, I think those are kind of the only two options right now. Like you said, we're kind of 8 right now. And then we can kind of get into the weeds on the high priorities you guys want to start with. Or, yeah, council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think jumping on that, using the resources that we have to not only have that third party stakeholder meeting, but also use them as community outreach and awareness and, what's going on and pushing the programs for down payment assistance, or whether it's, workforce housing development is being proposed, creating awareness about what that means and having the community understand that. I think another good one to stack behind those would be 7, and just prioritizing what, how the city can make it easier on the developer to make that come through faster, whether it's, code adjustments or the water policy, ideas there to make that transition be easier for the developer with the community outreach.
I agree, Luther.
Well, I'm wondering if we shouldn't divide this up, Mike, and sort of
Wait,
say,
do we want to start by prioritizing the list?
Yeah.
We've got short-term goals. We've got 10 items. You want to start by just doing that?
Yeah.
I mean, number 3 is already done.
Yeah.
So
Check.
that's an easy one. But my feeling is short-term goal number 2 is critical and has to be priority 1, is my feeling.
Yep.
Anybody disagree with that?
I don't disagree with it. I just don't understand, based on what we're saying, if that's really a function of this committee, though. I mean,
So if it's staff who's going to be organizing the meeting and having a staff representative that then comes back and reports to you guys, then that would be a staff's responsibility to organize the whole thing. It would, depending on the thoughts, I'm going to say this and then let me know your thoughts. If the committee didn't want to have everybody on the committee involved in that initial discussion and just have maybe 1 or 2 of you, then we could do more of a round table open house versus if we have the whole committee, it has to be structured with an agenda and a quorum, things like that. But if you guys want a staff representative or if you want to be on that meeting or both, so that's kind of where, how much does the committee want to do? How much do you guys want staff to do on that one? And then that will kind of format what kind of meeting it would be. Because again, if it's the whole committee, it's going to be agendized just like this. It's not going to be a casual conversation.
yeah, I guess that's my point, Mike, is that I'm thinking, I agree with you that it's going to morph into this coming, like we'll fold at some point, and then there's going to be this community entity that's pushing this forward long term. So if we're only seeing the city as just one person or part of this community stakeholder, is that an initiative we take on as a committee and do a study session and it's all public and all that stuff? Or do we get farther down the road just doing it organically?
Why don't you have an open house? Don't you think as the ambassadors for the issue of workforce housing, you would have all of you there to sell it to your community and you decide who to invite? I mean, this is a great start, but you may all know other people that are interested in this also and be the ambassadors, at least in the beginning. I don't know. Yeah, as a kickoff. Yeah, as a kickoff.
Right. Agreed. I guess the first answer is, as far as getting the stakeholder group started, if not us, who? I think we need to take the lead in that. And I don't know how it's going to morph into something else. I think we're going to do a lot of fact finding. We're going to reach out to the community. We're going to find out how much support there is from other organizations. Will it be a regional program and a new organization is formed that's more regional than a city organization? I think that's going to depend on mainly the stakeholders that says, yeah, that's what we want and we'll support that. Or it's not that high on our priority list. I think that has yet to come, is my feeling. I think we need to try our best to bring all this to fruition, but it's going to depend a lot on the community and the community support, and that starts, in my opinion, with those stakeholders.
Well, when I look at this list, you guys, I think about conquer and divide a little bit instead of all of us trying to move on one thing. If we divide some of this up, I mean, we have some expertise here at this table. If we take the areas of our expertise, a couple of us or one of us, conquer and divide, we move along a lot faster than all seven or of us trying to move at one time on one thing. You know, if you want to do an open house, okay, great. But like I look at, approach developers. I see there's some developers sitting right here that could handle that. I see investment financial programs. I see a guy sitting right here that can handle that. I'm kind of wondering, I mean, it's just another thought, but would we move faster if we took sort of assignments if we all volunteered for some part of this assignment and we took it on, and then regroup later and give everybody an update on how we're doing? I don't know.
Can I just throw this out to you just to visualize? And this is just a thought. What if we had maybe rented the Centennial Center and we had a kickoff? Because remember, we're all kind of intimately involved in this, but there's a whole public out there that doesn't really, I mean, they hear the words, but they don't understand it. We could entice, and then I think what you're talking about is the second step. Let's have the kickoff, because also I think the open house, if you invite all these stakeholders, you're going to know immediately by talking to them, they're going to be their buy-in, if you will. And that's going to help you decide where to put your efforts, because some of them may not be interested in it. It's not that it's not a pressing issue. They may be overwhelmed. They may be dealing it with it on their own terms, but at least it's going to tell you in the community-wise, and include the community. I would put a press release out there, a couple of them, talk about it on the radio, and have that big kickoff and see who shows up and who's interested, because that's going to tell you a lot. And then do what you're saying. Then you all can go out and reach out to your independent people and invite them, have them come to the open house and start to lay the groundwork, because look at all the stuff we've discovered in 10 months. It's not just an easy thing, but just I would make a big deal out of it in the beginning, get the awareness out there, and then start to do your work behind the scenes. That's just me.
Go ahead.
I personally like that idea. I think it would set the groundwork for us having this important role as ambassadors and starting to engage with community at that level. One of my thoughts that's sort of parallel to this is we really have a lot, I guess, our eggs in one basket with this grant proposal, and we're hoping that we receive the funding for it. And in my estimation, when I look at some of these goals, number 4, number 5, number 8 in particular, would probably be really a lot of heavy lifting for this person. If we don't get the grants, do we have a plan B? Are we allowed, and I guess that's a clarifying question for you guys, are we allowed to request funding for this line item that's been added to then support a staff person? I mean, what does that look like? I have a recommendation.
this would go back to the stakeholders. So, hey, we did our part. We applied for this grant. We didn't get anything. So now, stakeholders, we're looking at everybody here who's willing to participate in this to actually move it forward. I do think there's enough willpower amongst, Dignity Health, Yavapai College. These stakeholders are willing. It's just they haven't gotten together to actually talk about what are we going to do together, because many hands make the work light and everybody's looking at it as their own issue, like, oh my gosh, I can't recruit, so what am I going to do? I can't do anything, I'm stuck. But when we get everybody in the room with a similar problem, let's do it together. That's where we can make change happen. And if we don't get the grant, it's going to be, hey all, we're looking at you. Who's going to fund Devonna McLaughlin and her Northern Arizona Housing Solutions to fund a person to work over here for us? We have the contacts, we can reach out, but we didn't get the money, and everybody is aware the city has other priorities with public safety. So we're here to do our part, but you have to meet us halfway, kind of deal.
Well, for me, I realize that this is a hot button, guys, because we presented in front of 3 different boards now, and we get grilled pretty hard. So this is absolutely a hot button in our city and county-wide. So we're being watched here, what we do. So I think you're right, Connie. If we try to have an open house, it's going to attract a lot of attention.
I also think that the open house, we can lay to rest things like affordable housing, and we can say, here's what workforce housing represents. Here's who it benefits. And so a lot of the misconceptions that are out there by people, I don't want poor people living in my neighborhood, we can put those to rest, because I don't think people even understand what workforce housing is. I've talked to other folks trying to get an idea, and their first comment is, I don't want poor people in my neighborhood. And maybe I'm not communicating to them well, but they're not listening. So I think that open house gets everybody in the room, do a little presentation. First of all, let us tell you what workforce housing is and who it benefits, which is everybody that's going to be in that room. And I think that will ease some minds and maybe get somebody a little more interested in participating.
Could we take the power presentation that Nicole did, and you can, drill down and have some big posters on easels so that when people are there at the open house, they can go around, like we've been talking about all along. The first line should be, this is workforce housing for people that have a job, or, whatever. So right off the bat, people understand it's not the Section 8
Right.
NIMBY thing that
Yeah.
happens.
I think it'd be great to personalize it too, and maybe we could get a few, like maybe there's a city staffer that would be willing, anonymously, we could just say, hey, here are some real life examples. Here's a mom and a dad and what they earn, what they do. These are the people that we're serving, to really bring that message home.
But in addition, I've been asking for this as a definition. I think there should be one big bulletin board that's entitled, what can you do to help? And number 1, donate money. Number 2, I don't know, whatever, you guys come up with it, whatever it is. But I think you have to clearly define what they can do to help you. Mm-hmm. So, we talked a little bit about what the city's going to do. Are we going to give a water meter for half price? We still don't have that defined. I think we need to start working on the definition of what we're asking. We can't make the ask unless we know. It's not just as easy, we just want your money. I mean, that's obviously, a lot of people will just want to write a check and walk away. But we need to be able to define, the rest of it too.
I think having the stakeholders too, they can tell us what they want too. We're assuming this is what they want. We don't know what would make them happy.
Right.
And I said it a long time ago, you guys thought I was a little nuts, but on your deal, have a couple of firemen here in uniform, a couple of cops in uniform, because that is the beneficiary of workforce housing. That is a visual that implants. Just a guy in a uniform, man, it works, trust me, I know. So that would be the other side, and that's why I brought up, I see all these fire departments on this list. Send us a guy. just to help
Make
us.
sure they're on the invite list and be specific. Say, I'd like to have 4 or 5 guys show up. And maybe another, if we have these stations, with these big bulletin boards and people are, running around with their cocktail, we can do a depiction of a family, a fireman, a wife, and a child, or, so that they understand that, like, create a story. Nicole, you're really good at that.
Scotty.
Nicole, we have
Volunteered for everything.
we could have that that firefighter make a presentation based on the survey that's already existing. So Nicole, we have that survey that says, here's what I think is affordable. Here's what I could afford for a down payment. And it doesn't have to be the firefighter saying, well, here's what I can do. It's to be based on this survey of 200 people or however many responded from the one that went out. These are the results. And this affects me personally because I would participate in this, So it's not even that big of a lift to get to that point to make that presentation. So
We just heard from the fire chief, remember, that they had a qualified candidate from Tucson that accepted the job, couldn't find housing, had to turn it down. So we just heard about that last
Yeah,
week,
I think you're going to hear the same story from Amy,
Yeah.
Bonnie. You're
Sure.
going to hear the same
All of it.
story from
All of
Dave Rhodes,
And the hospital,
the hospital.
big time.
So, okay, so what I'm hearing is to get the stakeholder group started is go ahead and send an invitation to all of them, make a presentation and find out who's in and who wants to participate in that group. If it gets too big, we might have a subgroup within the group, like I said, but sounds like that's the direction this committee would like to go.
So just some clarification on our end. So would you guys like to have a small stakeholder group meeting first, or would you like to do a big open house kickoff with citizens and stakeholders and workforce? And 'cause it sounds like we have kind of two ideas going on that.
Yeah, I'll defer to the group. I was thinking a small group first, but ultimately, we've got to get all stakeholders together. So I think as long as we get from point A to point B, I don't see how we can.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, maybe we can get the stakeholders' input, to your point, Mike, and then we follow it up. That's our secondary ask at that meeting to say, hey, we'd like to schedule this kickoff meeting and for you to participate, because I think there's value in them also milling around the room. They can be adding content about the need just organically in conversation to make it more engaging for the public.
Yep. Ultimately, we're going to be asking for their time and their treasure.
But haven't we kind of done that though, man? I don't mean to disagree. I'm not saying no, but those stakeholders, a lot of them came here and talked to us.
Yeah, I don't.
yeah, but
We haven't put a group together.
But
We haven't-
the main difference too, though, is that now we have this approved. So before it was more like them coming and telling us what the problems were, and then hey, we're working on things. To now the council saying we believe in this, let's do it. So I think we do a small community stakeholder. We tell them more intimately the asks, which is like, hey, we're trying to fund this position, and this position will take care of 6 things on these short-term goals and long-term goals, and then just have this more informal conversation with them about what the needs are, the fact that we got approval, the fact that we're starting a funding bucket for the money to go to. If we can verify the 501c3 equivalency or whatever for them, now they're like, oh, okay, so now you have the means of us participating somehow with you financially or whatever. And then we get their buy-in. We're going to feel the room out with the stakeholders in that meeting, and then we can utilize the ones that are really wanting to support our efforts in the open house. Like to Nicole's point, they're going to be there now, part of the support system in the open house, saying like, we're Dignity Health and this is our problem and we're in for this. And we're in as much of it financially, as much of it, however. But I think it's smart to do that. And I think it's faster too, to get a small community stakeholder meeting is a lot faster than planning out a 4 to 6 week out giant open house event, which is going to be a lot of moving parts. So I support that, Mike, to do that. The 2 split probably.
So update them on where we are. I agree with that. That sounds.
Yeah, because now we have
reasonable.
something concrete we can tell them.
Yeah, okay.
And they can tell us what they want too. That's the other side of the coin. Because we really are assuming what they want at this point.
Mike, did you, at some point, maybe I missed it, did you make a determination that the way to go is to fund the down payment? Did I hear that correct? I mean, how are we going to
No, I believe that the solution to the problem is multifaceted.
Yeah.
And I think down payment assistance will handle some of the need out there. And it's also low-hanging fruit. There's already an organization that knows how to do it. It's just working with them to implement it. Now, that means, the city of Prescott is not going to get involved with down payment assistance for another agency. City of Prescott's, it's concerned about the city of Prescott, as it should be.
But do you feel comfortable making a list of potential options to satisfy this workforce housing crisis? One of them would be down payment assistance. What's the next one? For the stakeholders to understand what you're all considering.
Absolutely. I think that's first in my opinion, that's first on the list to say, we've been meeting for almost a year at that point when we get all the stakeholders together, and here's what we have found. Here's various ways to address the workforce housing challenges in this community. Now, what do you guys think? Are there others that we've not considered, other options? And of these options, what do you support and what don't you support?
So Amber, getting back on the specifics, if you guys define that, make a list. I just talked to Chelsea about making those big boards. So that's 2 boards that I think are important. Number 1 is what we just talked about now, but then also what can you do to help board? So big, giant on an easel as you get in there. So why don't you guys work on defining that so that she can make up those big boards or whoever?
And I don't know, Chelsea, on your thoughts. That I think is getting a little bit away from the agenda, because the agenda is just prioritizing, not necessarily getting into the details of each one. It's just going through, and we can talk about that in like a future agenda, but I think that's getting a little bit off of what the actual agenda item is.
Thank you. And I'm sitting here, I think we're going to have a hard time prioritizing these just by throwing out ideas. I think each of us are going to have different priorities. So I'm going to suggest that of the 10 short-term goals, and I think we should concentrate on that, I'm going to suggest you right now sit down and write your priority, turn them into me, and I'll put all of our priorities together and then compile a list of priorities based on the group's thinking. And that way that's done. And I won't do it during this meeting, but I'll follow up with an email that says, here's the group's priorities as a group.
And we can still get going on the stakeholder meeting, preparing an invitation for that. And
Right.
so, yeah, I think that's a good start.
An invitation and then a program. We want to make sure we have what we're going to provide and what our end goal is at that meeting. And I think our end goal is, hey, if you're going to be involved with this, we're going to ask for your time and your treasure.
Okay.
My homework's done.
Done. Overachiever. No.
Oh, here, let me. I'm putting a name on it.
Yeah, put your name on it.
I know, right?
I haven't had to take a test in forever.
Well, if you want, I can talk about staff updates while you guys are working on that. I just didn't want to distract you. Okay. I only have a couple. So, for staff updates,
Cool, thank you.
we do have a tentative April 26th date for a possible tour of the Pronghorn project. The Baja Bungalows. That's so much fun. So if that date doesn't work for anybody, let me know. And it's just a tentative date in the afternoon right now, but April 26th. So we'll send that out via email, and then if that's an issue, but that should be a pretty neat one.
25th,
26th.
26th, yes, that's the Whiskey 50.
Well, we're in PV anyways. It's not.
Some of us
I
participate
know. I'm
in
kidding.
that.
Okay, so Whiskey Off-Road. Okay, so we will look at some additional dates as well, and then we'll send out some additional dates.
Okay, I'm gonna give, sorry.
Oh, no, you're
Sorry.
You're okay.
Yeah, I need,
Friend with a VIN.
if I'm gonna compile these, Nicole and
Just in
John.
ranking, right?
Yeah, rank them 1 through 10.
Oh, even the ones that are like bottom? I only did the
Yep.
first 4.
Yep. Yeah, if you don't mind, rank them 1 through 10, and that way I can compile the scores. If
Well,
you
some
guys
of them
have
are
the same number for,
Kind of done.
I can't.
Amber, I was going to ask you about that. I don't want that to get forgotten. I really want to do that tour. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
And they want us to do it, and it
Yeah.
should be. And we.
Okay, I apologize.
No, that's okay. But yeah, so we are working on that. We'll get a couple other dates.
Okay.
And then we are working with Habitat to try to get them to come talk as well on what they could partner with the committee on. So we're talking to them on that. Everybody has this list of stakeholders, partners, and resources with brief description. All of them have really good websites too, so there's some really interesting groups out there. One that's not on there that we weren't sure whether or not we would be adding them until we met with them today this morning. We met with NACA this morning, which is Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America. And what they do is they have a lot of financial programs for low to moderate income, but as we've learned, workforce housing unfortunately fits into that pretty well sometimes. So, but they have a lot of financial programs for housing counseling and financial counseling. They do home buyer purchase programs, new construction, purchase and renovation, rental housing, down payment assistance, loans. So they do a whole lot of different financial products and projects to help with housing and affordable housing, workforce housing. So I've talked to them, and as we go and when we get to those items, they're willing to come talk to us about what they already have, but they're also willing to work with us to build a financial program that fits our needs here. So something that we can keep in mind to have them come talk when we get to that financial aspect of creating maybe internal financial plans. So they had a lot of great resources. I would look at their website, and they do range into some areas that we won't be, such as Section 8 and things like that, but they do have a high focus on just getting people who are working and trying to live in houses, which I think is kind of our stuff.
Amber, what's the name of that group?
So it's NACA, N-A-C-A, but it's Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America. So they have a lot of things they've already done groundwork on that I think would be a great starting point for when we get to those financial aspects. They work a lot with HUD already and CBDG programs, so they're familiar with this world and the financial opportunities available. That was a lot.
Cool.
I think that's all the staff updates I have. And as soon as we hear about funding from the grant, we'll let everybody know.
Yeah, we'll know, let us know if we have that seed money from outside sources. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
And then could we have staff recommendations on how that stakeholder meeting, who's invited, how it's presented, stuff like that? So the next meeting, we can decide on a date and implementation.
Perfect. That's no problem at all.
Sense.
We'll even create a draft invitation and everything. Cool.
So I don't break open meeting laws, I'll get this compiled, get it to Amber, and then Amber will give it
Yeah.
to the group.
Do we want to add more people to this stakeholder list, or is this just kind of a start?
Yeah, if you have thoughts of adding people to the list, absolutely bring them to the table.
Send them my way. I can add anybody, and that's for stakeholders, partners, and resources as we go forward.
Perfect.
You guys have a lot of connections as experts in your fields. Send me contact information. We'll just keep growing this list, but especially people that you really want at that stakeholder initial meeting. Send them my way if they're not on the list.
Yeah, I can think of a contractor that wants to be on that. With
It's like,
350
there's
employees,
one
we have
person
the
that-
same issues.
Also, somebody from the restaurant, hotel, motel.
Yeah, Ponderosa wasn't on there. Dignity's not on there. There's a whole bunch
Dignity's
There.
on there.
on that.
They're just under YRMC.
Oh,
I-
yeah.
I'll break that habit eventually. But yeah, we can definitely have the chamber come, YCCA come, because, yeah, PDP. So that way we're not making it too big, but we're getting the players involved that have those connections. I mean, Sandy from YCCA can probably get any contractor in the area involved if needed. And then the chamber has a lot of access to those hotels and the restaurants. That way, it still stays small enough that it's manageable, but we get all of the big players who can get everybody else involved when it's time to do that.
Do you want any suggestions right now or just emailed?
You can email them unless you have one on your mind you don't want to forget.
I was just thinking of maybe a representative from PAR.
Yeah, PAR would be great.
What is that?
Presbyterian
Yeah, we need
Association
to
of
notify the
Realtors.
banks too.
Yeah, they
It's like
might be able to also
20% of
that
the workforce.
Bank.
title stuff. Title donation.
I want some of my money back. They've charged me all these years.
Okay, anything else? Are we done?
I think so.
Wait a minute,
Let's adjourn.
no,
What?
no, sorry, it's early. There was a lot of pushback about the ADU thing at council, right? Is there some work we can do to clean up the language to help convince them that we're really looking for workforce housing out of these ADU units? I don't have an answer for this, I'm just asking the group. I don't mean to always look at you, but I'm asking the group.
Number one, again, I think we're getting into the weeds. That's not agendized, so I'm a little concerned about that since
Okay.
it's not on our agenda.
Can we get it on one?
And we certainly can. It's a slippery slope, but I think it can be addressed. I think we had some good discussion with council on Tuesday about it, but there's some people that are sensitive about that issue, so
Okay.
we want to be cautious.
The planning division is still monitoring code changes that have happened in other jurisdictions to see how the legislature responds and see what gets challenged and what can go forward.
Okay. And then, do we want to talk about a work session? The thing I talked to you about, if you guys wanted to hear about that more in detail, I'd rather do it then.
I think that would be appropriate. Let's, when it comes to funding, let's see if we've got the initial seeded funding. And then I think a work session on funding would be a great idea, including John's suggestions with title companies. How you implement that and how is it both of those seem to be both of your ideas, I think, are voluntary, not a requirement, because I think when we require it, all of a sudden we open up a new can of worms.
Right.
So we need to talk about how that happens.
So in a work session though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd be more comfortable then.
Good.
How about you, John?
Well, and not to be the party killer here, but the only difference between a voting session and a study session is it's still going to be agendized. It's still going to follow this exact same process. Study session, you just can't vote. Voting session, you can vote. So if the committee gets together in a quorum, which is 4 or more, it has to be in this format to where it's agendized. You can still have casual conversations, but it's not going to be a work session that's not going to have an agenda.
But is it televised to the public?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
not like a-
All of them are public meetings.
Okay.
So if you, and you gotta be careful about open meeting law because if like the two of you were to get together and talk about something, but then you go and talk about it with the other committee members and everybody gets a consensus, we just violated open meeting law. So anything that the committee talks about should be in public unless it's like a subcommittee, but even then we do public minutes and things like that. So anything you don't want public probably shouldn't be addressed by the committee. So if it's something you're not comfortable with the public knowing, then it's probably not an item for the committee.
Well, no, I am, but I think there's some groundwork, and then, I'm not trying to hide anything, no.
Yeah.
I got nothing to hide that way. I'm really proud of what I want to talk about, but there's a time and a place for everything.
Yeah. So, but just so you know, just in meetings like this, they have to follow that certain format just so we don't get in trouble with the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
They're scary.
So Amber, can you remind us of when, I know for council, it's more like legal things that they have closed session for, but for us, is there ever a time that our committee would be able to have a closed session?
Not much. It would have to be, so I think personnel issues, like, which is not really a thing for this committee. If you guys did want to get into, even if you were to do a contract with someone, it would still have to go to council. So there's really not, unless, can you think of anything that would fit in this committee?
Yeah, well, the stakeholders is not this committee,
Correct.
again, so I don't think that's an issue. I can see the potential of having an executive committee that would be a closed session if it met the rules of an executive session, excuse me.
But there's very, very
Right.
strict rules and very few exceptions that,
If we're going to negotiate with an organization in order to bring recommendations to council, that
could
might
be one.
fit an executive session.
But I do believe if you had, and this is just a hypothetical situation, if you had a person that wanted to donate a large amount of money and you needed to discuss their financials, that is a reason to go into CLIP. They'll request it. And a lot of times they'll have legal representation. I mean, those are things that that they don't want disclosed to the public. I mean, we're dealing with that now in several situations, and they have a right to that privacy.
And specific legal advice, if it's attorney-client privilege information or conversation, that could be another one.
But Randy, to your point too, and I'm going to talk to Matt Pedracki about this. I do believe that as a committee, you can have what's called an open forum where you can speak freely, and I'll find out about that because I know a lot of times you want to go off into the weeds, but there's a lot of detail that can be discovered in the weeds sometimes, and there is a format for that. But I need to confirm that there's a way to do that so you guys can discuss things at length. Because again, there's a lot of things inside of that people are not aware of that you may have knowledge of.
Okay.
Okay, I'll try again. Are we adjourned? Anything
I
else?
just like being around you, Mike. I tell you.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.